Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Before we dive in, I want to go through the fine print and share how we can work together. Because healing from this kind of pain takes a lot more than time. It takes the right kind of support. I work with people entangling themselves from emotionally abusive relationships, coercive control, trauma bonds, high conflict co-parenting dynamics, high conflict divorce, and if you're at the beginning of the road and wondering what divorce would look like. I offer one-on-one coaching at every stage. If you're still in the relationship, if you're unsure if it's abuse, if you know it's abuse but you're having trouble understanding what that looks like, or what to do with it, I can help you name what's happening, start setting boundaries that work for you, and figure out what you need. If you're thinking about leaving, we'll explore what that might look like in a grounded and personalized way. If you're navigating divorce or custody or co-parenting with a high conflict person, I can help you document, strategize, and stay emotionally anchored, especially when you're being gaslit, discredited, and re-traumatized by the legal system. If you've already left and you're stuck in the trauma bond, or if you've been discarded and struggling to feel like yourself again, I can help you rebuild self-trust and reconnect with your own nervous system in a way that actually feels doable. Everything I do is highly personalized. I don't walk you through a one-size-fits-all program. I listen, I reflect, and I guide you based on what you're facing right now. And some people work with me through a one-time validation call, which is offered on my website, where we zero in on one issue you're struggling with and start to untangle it together. Others work with me on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on what's going on in your specific situation. And this is especially helpful when healing from emotional abuse and also in divorce. If you're curious about starting, I offer a $25 intro call, which if you listen to my older episodes, I call it a clarity call. It used to be free, and I talk about it at a later episode, but really a lot of people were no-showing to those calls, and that was taking away time from clients that I do work one-on-one with. And so if we move forward, I just take that fee and apply it to your first session. That intro call is just for us to get on the same page so you can share what's going on for you and I can share how I might be able to help. I only take a limited number of those calls per month because one-on-one coaching is the core of my work. Out of all these offerings that I have, one-on-one coaching is the thing that I do the most, and I do it 6 days a week most of the time, 5 to 6 days a week. And so if my calendar looks full and if there's not a time that you can get in, you can email me at jessicaknightcoaching.com, and I always try and make space where I can. And I may also always have a few openings from one-on-one client reschedules. You can also explore self-paced courses and toolkits at jessicaknight.thinkific.com, including Divorcing a Narcissist 101 and the Emotional Abuse Breakthrough course. I have a documentation course and my new signature program, Unhooked, which is a private podcast and course that walks you through the full cycle of abuse, helps you map it in your relationship and how to break it and how to begin to see what it really is that you're going through. If you want ongoing support in a more flexible way, you could always check out my Substack at jessicaknight.substack.com. Each month I focus on a different theme, from trauma bonding to divorce to cluster B to sexual coercion to emotional abuse to toxic breakups. Those are just some from this year. Paid members get access to monthly deep dives, master classes, Q&As, strategy kits, and I'm working on some more group options. There is also a free option and a monthly option. So please head over to Substack. The link is in my show notes. You also can just search Jessica Knight Coaching and I'll come up. Everything that I create is meant to help. My coaching, my writing, my courses, this podcast, it's built around the one truth that you're not crazy. You are conditioned to doubt your reality, and I want to help you change that and understand what you're going through. If you like this podcast, the best thing that you can do is subscribe and rate the episode 5 stars. You can find me on my websites, emotionalabusecoach.com and high-conflict divorcecoaching.com. All of the offerings that I just mentioned are also in the show notes below. Now let's get to the episode.
Thank you for being here. Today I want to talk about something that is so incredibly frustrating. It's when the abuser will typically say that you can't communicate even when you are a great communicator. I've worked with so many people that communicate in their jobs for a living, or I've never had anyone say to them that they can't communicate. The abusive person at one point decides that that person can't communicate or they don't communicate clearly. And a lot of times it's a tool to throw you off edge and make you think that you don't know how to talk, that you don't know what to say. And it's honestly one of the most classic abusive tactics that is not only insidious, but it's really effective if you don't see it for what it is. Because when an abuser tells you that you can't communicate, especially when you have a history of being an excellent communicator, they're not talking from reality. They are wanting you to doubt yourself. Because if you believe that you can't communicate, or if you start internalizing that message, you start second guessing everything that you say and you start blaming yourself. It's deliberate. It is gaslighting because it is designed to make you feel really destabilized, and that your sense of confidence, your sense of clarity is just totally shaken. Because the issue is not about whether or not you actually communicate clearly. It's about making you question yourself so that they can control the narrative. This plays out into DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. This is how it looks. They deny what you're saying, they attack your character, and then they reverse the roles so that suddenly you're the problem. And so now here they are giving you constructive feedback. And if you don't take it, then you're not listening, right? Here, once again, now you don't want help. It turns into a way to sabotage your credibility, because from a behavioral perspective, behavioral profiling perspective, this is intentional because it's an intentional tactic used to manipulate boundaries. And it's used that when someone tells you you can't communicate, despite overwhelming evidence, it's about controlling the entire frame of communication. Because if they can convince you that your communication is flawed, then they get to define what good communication is, which is frightening. And it means that you'll start tailoring how you speak, what you say, and even if you speak, to meet this moving target that they have now created. This is coercive control. And over time, this really erodes your confidence to the point where you may second guess even the tiniest statements before you speak, which is what they want. You'll either go quiet by reducing conflict, but also reducing your voice, or you'll over-explain and over-justify, which really just gives them more material to twist around, because then you get defensive. And so they're going to use that against you too. And the scary part is usually how quickly this escalates, because when I looked back and I was thinking about how this has shown up in my life, it's first it comes out like, I don't understand what you mean. And then it very quickly goes to, you never actually make sense, or you're impossible to talk to. And every single step is designed to create more obstacles to actually communicating, because they don't want to communicate. And a lot of times I actually really believe it's because you are not saying what they want to hear. You're not saying what they want, right? You're calling them out maybe, or you are naming something that's true. You're naming a pattern. And so by saying you can't communicate basically means say that to me in a different way that doesn't actually hold me accountable, or say it in another way so that I hear it, but I'm not going to hear it and I'm going to continue not to hear it so then I don't have to be accountable. They don't actually have a communication problem. They have an accountability problem. And when they say you can't communicate, what they're really saying is I refuse to process anything that makes me uncomfortable or to face my own behavior. Sometimes when people or clients are talking to me about various patterns, what I do is I listen for or listen to hear really what the abuser is saying underneath the surface. And so a lot of times it's rephrase it in a way that doesn't make me look bad, dress it up so I can deny it without looking ridiculous, or say it really vaguely so that I can not take responsibility. So you end up rewording, softening, padding, and chewing your word just to avoid triggering them. Over time, you become conditioned to deliver truth in a diluted dose, which is exactly how they maintain like their comfort, their control. And it gets really confusing because eventually you start to believe that it's true. You believe that you're the one who's an issue. You believe that you actually can't communicate. And when this happens, when I've seen this happen, and it's happened to me too, you start looking at their communication style as the way that you need to communicate, or you'll start Googling things, trying to find it out or think about things another way. And I've had people even say to me, this is from partners, you're too blunt, or that's not clear. And I'm like, well, I can't be both. I can't be like blunt and clear, but then like too blunt and not clear. If I'm saying exactly what it is, I can't communicate it in a way that's like, well, maybe if I add this flowery language to it, then maybe possibly, like, that's not me. So basically what you're saying is like, you don't like communicating with me. Okay, got it. But it's not because I'm not clear. It's because you actually don't like the clarity. And it twists us into like these pretzels because it makes you wonder, will I ever say something that this person will ever hear? And that's like the mind-bending part of the abuse that really takes hold here, is that the manipulation gets so stuck that you start doing work for them, for the abuser, because now you're trying to explain to the abuser that you can only communicate the way that you can communicate. So you're saying, I can only communicate this way. This is how I communicate. I'm trying to like, communicate a little bit more so that we're more aligned, but this is my natural way of being. And you're saying you don't like that. Instead of saying, okay, that's not my preference, I don't like that, you're arguing with me about how I need to be different. And at first, when this first happens, most people, I think, know that the other person's wrong. You're a good communicator, but the constant repeated accusations chip away at that. And that is what a gaslighter wants to do. They want to make you question your reality so that you can no longer trust yourself without their approval. And it creates these contradictory demands that are just like literally impossible to meet. You're too blunt, but also you're not clear. You're not making sense. But can you say that nicer? And I think one of the worst parts is when you start Googling how to communicate better, you're not doing it for your own self, your own growth. You're doing it to try and solve a problem that doesn't actually even exist, because you're trying to find this like magical combination of words that make them finally acknowledge what you've been telling them. But that doesn't ever come because the issue wasn't your words. It was their refusal to even hear them. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about all of the ways in which we turn ourselves into this like pretzel, because I notice people do it every day, but I also can see it so clearly in my own past. I'm going to walk you through some of the patterns at least. They set a moving target. So they'll say things like, you're too blunt today, but tomorrow you're unclear. So today's argument, you're too blunt. Next time you argue, now you're unclear. You have no idea what you're doing. You respond by modifying your behavior. So you soften your tone. You do the chit sandwich or whatever it's called. I'm awful at it, so I don't even know what it is. But, where you say a nice thing with like a criticism and then another nice thing. You reword what you want to say. You over-explain. That's not good enough either. then what they tend to do is they will withhold acknowledgement or approval. And no matter what you do, it's not going to be good enough. So then, of course, you increase your effort because that's where the overthinking, Googling, self-analysis, I could do better. I could talk about this with somebody. Jessica, how can I communicate more clearly? And they maintain control because they decide whether your communication method works, but it's only going to work if they stay in that position of control and authority. In these dynamics, there's no way you can phrase something that will make them truly hear and accept accountability because they're listening to you and what you're saying is only conditional when it works, when they don't have to edit anything based on what you say. And I think a big part of this is that the focus becomes on the form of what you're saying, not the actual thing that you are trying to communicate. I remember there was a situation and my daughter is a child. So my daughter is not going to say anything perfectly. I don't expect anything perfect from her in her communication. The fact that she's communicating is perfect for me. And so when she says, Mommy, I don't like the way you handled that, or Mommy, why did you say that? Or like, Mommy, why'd you let that person, like, or Mom, I don't like the way that you did that. More recently, it's Mom, can you not look like you're wearing pajamas when you pick me up at school? Not wearing pajamas, but you get the point. And I'm like, okay, I don't need her to communicate to me perfectly. I can listen for what she's saying. She's not saying I'm not safe. She's not saying I don't like that. She's saying my boundary is, can you just not do that? One of the examples that happened was I live in a city and so therefore there are city drivers around and I was making a turn and like somebody just started like yelling out the window and I just put up the window and her boundary was the opposite. She was like, I don't like that you didn't yell back at them. Like you should beep your horn. And I'm like, Charlotte's not going to do anything. She goes, but I don't like that they take advantage of you. And in that moment, it wasn't a moment for me to roll down my window and scream. It also wasn't a moment for me to say, Charlotte, no, it's not. But the boundary that she's saying is, I don't like when I see that happen. And now I can't control that. I can't stop it, but I can listen for what she's saying. She's saying, can you not come in pajamas? Meaning, Mom, sweatpants aren't cool. I can listen to what she's actually saying because I watch her do it with other people and watch her get uncomfortable, watch her say, I didn't like that they said that. And my only job is to hear it and to listen and to help her and to tell her and acknowledge it, that I hear her and I believe her and I value that voice in her. Because when you are healthy and healthy mindset, healthy people, they're looking to hear from you. They're not listening to you to not hear it. They're not waiting for you to do a magic way to say something so that they'll finally hear you, right? They're listening to hear you. They're listening because they want to hear you. They'll find what you're saying and what you're saying or ask for clarification. They might have feelings about how something is said, but they will address the substance of it. That's what a healthy person does. Abusers actually do the opposite. They weaponize, they tone police, and the real message the thing is that you're really trying to say never actually ever lands. And it's so dangerous because in the cycle of abuse, the message that sends is one of silence. It's the way you speak is wrong, so your feelings are invalid. And over time, you really do start censoring yourself. And just remember that if they heard you, if they listened, it would mean they'd probably have to do something. They'd have to change their behavior. They'd have to face the harm, or at the very least acknowledge your lived reality. And for an abusive person, that's a direct threat to their power. So instead, they try and pretend that the problem is your clarity when in reality, the problem is their willingness to even listen. It's the willingness to even hear you. So they just say, you haven't communicated clearly. I hope that this was helpful in terms of you being able to take a step back, debunk that narrative, and to really just think, do I communicate clearly? Do I not? We all have things to work on. I'm not saying that, there aren't places for that, but right here in this moment, if you're listening to this, especially like I've talked to lawyers, nurses, doctors, therapists, I'm sure you communicate clearly. They just don't want the message. So I really do hope that this was helpful. And if you do need support, if you need help, you always can reach out to me. I run one-off sessions. I do consistent coaching. but I am here to help. I am here to help validate you. And really, my life's goal is so that you don't feel crazy, honestly. And so I really hope that this helped make sense of some things that likely don't make sense. But you can find me at emotionalabusecoach.com.